Hi, I'm Nick Schultz, the editor of American.com here at the American Enterprise Institute. I'm pleased to be joined today by Congressman Tom Price of Georgia. Congressman, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Nick. Thanks so much. Good to be with you.
We recently had a court decision in Virginia about the health care law. You're a physician, also have been deeply involved in health care legislation. What is your sense of what this court decision means in validating the individual mandate for health reform, Obamacare? Obviously, we can expect to maybe see Supreme Court action down the road, but what will this mean for Republicans who've been talking about repeal and replace and just health reform generally for the next Congress?
Well, I think it's an incredibly important decision because what it does fundamentally is validate what we were saying throughout this debate, and that is that never in this country have we said as a matter of policy from the federal government, by virtue of being a United States citizen only, or in this country legally only, you must purchase a product, and this is what it must be. We've never said that before. And so and consequently, many of us at the time said, this is clearly an unconstitutional provision. And so the court validated what we had been objecting to in this bill. It's further important because all of the, quote, solutions that the other side came up with, essentially in their bill to address the issue of access or affordability or even quality, all of those issues rest upon the linchpin of the individual mandate. So as I have told folks, it's simply a house of cards, and if you pull out that linchpin, pull out the individual mandate, the whole thing comes tumbling down, which I think will happen. I think the Supreme Court will ratify the decision of the lower court.
Now, you could have some proponents of the legislation say, well, fine, we don't need the individual mandate. We have a couple of other options, right? We could go to a single payer, which is what some of us wanted all along. I've seen some other proposals that we could model our health system on, say, Germany's, for example, where they have, as I understand the system, you can opt out. But if you do opt out, then you opt out of the system for 5 years. So there's a penalty in a sense. But then there's no mandate.
Right.
So they get over the constitutional hurdle, but they still achieve the same goal. What do you think of that?
Well, I think both of those are terrible ideas, and they would, from a matter of public policy, require a complicit House of Representatives, which is no longer going to be there. What we are going to promote is patient-centered health care, which puts patients and families and physicians in charge of health care, and not the federal government. So it will not work. Their system will not work without the individual mandate. Now, that being said, if we just remove the individual mandate and not the rest of the legislation, which is why this is incredibly important to repeal the rest of the legislation by and large, then things like the guaranteed issue, which force insurance companies to provide health coverage for individuals at a cost that the federal government decides. What that will do, if you don't have the individual mandate, which we also suggested at the time, is drive insurance companies out of the business of providing health coverage for folks, which will only leave the governmental entities in place if you don't reform the system. So the President's notion that if you like what you have, you can keep it has been proven to be false. The unconstitutionality of the individual mandate now has been supported and validated by a federal court. So bit by bit by bit, the kinds of things that we said would come to pass are coming to pass, and consequently, the opportunity is there for us to then work on diligently, deliberately, and have a real debate about what patient-centered health care, what our health care system ought to look like, because the status quo is clearly unacceptable.
And so what specifically do you think we can expect from a Republican House early in this next Congress on health care?
Well, I think we will vote to repeal Obamacare. I think that, and I get folks to say, well, why are you going to do that? The Senate isn't going to adopt it or take that up, and even if they did, the President clearly wouldn't sign that. But I think it's important because the American people have spoken very loudly and very clearly that we don't like this bill. We don't like this law. We didn't like it at the time, and we like it even less now. The House of Representatives is the House of the people. And so it's important for us to say, we listened, we heard you, and we're going to act upon that. So I think very early in the next session, the House of Representatives will vote to repeal Obamacare. I predict that will be a bipartisan vote. I think you'll find remarkable support on the other side of the aisle as well, even some individuals who supported the old bill. Secondly, we need to move forward with positive solutions, patient-centered solutions, because as I mentioned, the status quo is unacceptable. What does that mean? It means expanding the purchasing field for health coverage. So purchase across state lines, making certain that individuals, that there's greater competition in the provision of health insurance, health coverage for folks, so that as a family out there across this great land, they can say, I'm not interested in having what the government thinks I ought to have. I want the kind of health coverage that is best suited for me and for my family. And the only way you get to that is by having a very robust private market. Secondly, we need to make certain that we address the issues of portability and pre-existing. You ought not be priced out of the market if you have an awful diagnosis or an awful injury, and you ought not lose your insurance if you change your job or you lose your job. Those are faults of the current system. The good news is they can be corrected without putting the government in charge. And then finally, we absolutely must address the whole issue of lawsuit abuse. The practice of defensive medicine, those things that are done to make it so that a doctor or a healthcare provider.
And you say this as you are a doctor.
That's exactly right.
You know a little bit about this.
It's about 25% of the healthcare dollar that we spend in this country. $600 billion is estimated on the practice of defensive medicine. And those are those tests and procedures and examinations and items that are performed to make it so that the doctor, if he or she is ever called into a court of law, can look at the judge and the jury in the eye and say, I did everything. Look, and then give the list of everything that they did. Mm-hmm. That's the practice of defensive medicine. And we need very robust lawsuit abuse reform that will save literally hundreds of billions of dollars.
Okay. A couple of quick questions about some committees and your roles on that. You've been on Financial Services Committee. Obviously, we had huge financial services reform of a kind in the dodd-frank bill, which was passed over opposition from Republicans in this last Congress. We have a new Congress coming in, new House, controlled by Republicans. Is the mood among your colleagues, hey, we should go back and reform this, and we have some concrete ideas to do that? And if so, what is it? Or is it, well, we lost that one, we're going to move on? What can we expect on financial services?
No, we put forward a very positive piece of legislation, I thought, H.R. 3310 in the last Congress, fully 6 months before they passed their regulatory bill for the financial services industry. And we believe that the bill that they passed actually is depressive on the economy, that it doesn't free up the wonderful entrepreneurial genius of this great land. We believe that there are positive things that you can do. One is that to address the whole issue of Fannie and Freddie, the item at the core of the meltdown, many believe, of the financial crisis that we had, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, was not even addressed in the previous legislation. And that has to be addressed. How you do that, there are a number of ways to do that, but it must be addressed so that exposure isn't there. Secondly, we believe that the whole notion of too big to fail, of the government bailout being in place, is simply wrong. That it results in a skewed marketplace, that it results in an uncertainty out there in the market that is not supportive of economic vitality. And consequently, we need to say with absolute certainty to the American people and to American business, there will be no more bailouts. We're done with that phase of this experiment because it was incredibly destructive. And then finally, we need appropriate regulatory reform. And what that means from our standpoint is a flexibility among the regulators to make it so that if the industry out there comes up with a new financial product, it's not immediately outlawed, which is what the other side wants to do. We just need to have somebody minding the store. We need to have somebody watching what's going on out there so we don't end up in the situation where we were before. So there are wonderful positive things that can be done that will provide that vitality in our economy.
Were there some good things in Dodd-Frank as far as you're concerned? Things you'd keep or build on?
I'd have to go back and review. I think by and large it is absolutely destructive to the economic vitality, didn't address the core issues, and continues to keep in place the whole bailout notion. That's just wrong. It's just wrong.
Final question or area for you, which is taxes. You're going to be in this incoming Congress on the Ways and Means Committee. Congratulations.
Thank you.
It's an important committee. There's a tax fight going on right now over the Bush tax cuts, but we're not really talking about fundamental tax reform right now. We have had the Debt and Deficit Commission talk about the need for fundamental tax reform if we're going to address the entitlement crisis going forward. There were some interesting ideas in that, I thought. What's your sense of what Republicans in the House will want to pursue on taxes in this next year in Congress? And might corporate tax rates be something that would be on the agenda? My colleague here at AEI, Kevin Hassett, points out that very soon the corporate tax rate in the United States is going to be the highest of any OECD country. So when you talk about competitiveness, when you talk about need for job creation, it's very high. What is the tax agenda for Republicans in the House in this coming year?
You know, there's almost nothing that you can point to at this point under the current leadership that has been supportive of economic vitality and expanding the economic interaction within our country. And taxes is at the core of that. So when you say that the business tax, the corporate tax, is going to be the highest in industrialized nations in the United States, that ought to be just astounding to people. It is so destructive to economic vitality out there and so destructive to job creation. So I think what we will be talking about is fundamental tax reform across the board. Whether it is a broadening of the tax base and a flattening of the tax rates, whether it is a significant decrease in the corporate tax to provide for incentives for job creation, whether it's holding down or doing away with capital gains dividends taxation for at least a period of time so that you, again, stimulate that economy. What we're doing right now is not working, and it is a disincentive to the expansion of our economy. So there has to be a fundamental reform. I think actually, curiously, it may be one of those areas where there could be some common ground with the administration. The administration has talked about the need for fundamental tax reform. It'll be curious to see exactly what that means to President Obama. But I think that discussion point has to occur. And maybe it's just to lay the predicate for the presidential race and then 2012 and after the 2012 election so that we can have fundamental tax reform early in that next administration, regardless of who's in the White House. But it's absolutely necessary because what we're doing right now is punishing business, punishing entrepreneurship, punishing individuals who have dreams and visions out there about how to expand this economy.
Okay, great. My guest today is Congressman Tom Price of Georgia. Congressman, thanks so much for stopping by and talking to us.
Appreciate it.